I knew something was off the second my CEO said my name into the microphone. Not because he mispronounced it, he never did. I was one of his key people, his go-to guy, the one he dragged into every investor call when he needed charts to move the right way. No, what set me off was the way the room went quiet. Right after. The kind of quiet where you suddenly become very aware of what you're about to say and what you're about to lie about, if you're not careful. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm a 36-year-old data lead in a mid-sized tech company. Not a founder, not an executive. Just the guy who sits between idea and numbers and makes sure one doesn't kill the other. 4 years ago, I joined a company I'll call Norvale. SaaS, B2B, the usual LinkedIn buzzword smoothie. When I joined, we were around 120 people. By the time this story happened, we were pushing 400 and celebrating our 10-year anniversary. From the outside, Norvale looked healthy. We weren't unicorn flashy, but we were profitable, had 2 solid funding rounds behind us, and a CEO who knew how to work a room. He had that TED Talk cadence, a polished origin story about starting in a garage, and a favorite phrase, "We're a family here." You probably know the type. Internally, it was fine. Not a horror show, not a dream job. Just a place where you had to pick your battles carefully if you wanted to sleep at night. My battles started about a year before that anniversary. We had a huge, ugly client migration project blow up in our faces. A big enterprise customer decided to consolidate all their tools. And our platform was either going to be the system of record, or we were going to be the vendor they wrote off in a footnote. The deal was worth 8 figures over several years. If we botched the migration, we were done with him. If we pulled it off, our CEO would get to stand on stage and talk about land and expand for the next 5 years. The problem was, our original project lead quit 2 months in. Burnout, bad scope, bad communication, pick a reason. Suddenly there was a pile of broken integrations, a furious customer, and a deadline that hadn't moved. That's when they came to me. It was a Friday night. I was literally zipping up my backpack when my manager pinged me on Slack. Got a minute? Exec floor. The exec floor was just the top floor of the building with slightly better coffee and worse air. CEO, CFO, head of HR, my manager, and VP of product were there, all looking like they'd been arguing for an hour. Nobody offered me a seat at first. That was my first clue. The CEO finally turned, smiled that practice smile of his, and said, "We need your help, man." They laid it out. The migration was behind. The client was threatening to walk, and in his words, "We need someone who actually knows what they're doing and can deal with bullshit without exploding." That apparently was me. Then came the actual hook. "If you take this on, see it through, and stay with us through the anniversary," he said, "we're putting a retention bonus on you. 85,000 on top of your usual comp." He dropped the number like it was nothing, like he was offering me an extra PTO day, not more than half my yearly salary. I didn't immediately say yes. I asked the questions you're supposed to ask when you've been in corporate long enough. In writing? Tied to what milestones? When is it paid out? Is it approved already or in discussion? The CFO jumped in with the spreadsheet speak. He said the budget was already allocated under key personnel retention, that legal would draft an addendum on Monday, that the board loved investing in talent. HR nodded along like a bobblehead. The CEO clapped me on the shoulder. "We'll take care of you. You take care of this." They sent me the draft the following Tuesday. I still have the PDF. Retention bonus of USD 85,000, gross, payable upon the earlier of successful completion of the X-client migration, as defined in Annex A, and our company's 10-year anniversary date, subject to continuous employment in good standing. Legalese but clear. My name, my employee ID, the amount. It wasn't a vague promise. It was a document with version history and comments. I read it carefully, made 2 small comments about the definition of successful completion, and the timing of the payout, and sent it back. Legal acknowledged. HR wrote, "Looks good, we'll finalize once CFO signs off." The CEO replied with a thumbs up emoji and, "You're our guy." And then nothing moved. Not really. For the next few weeks, I was too busy to care. I took over the migration, put in the kind of hours that make your smartwatch suggest calling an ambulance. I rebuilt half the data pipeline, renegotiated parts of the scope with the client's tech team, held daily stand-ups with people in 3 time zones. It wasn't heroic. It was just boring, difficult work that no one wants to do, and everyone wants to own the results of. Every now and then I'd ask my manager, "Hey, what's up with that addendum?" He'd say, "Oh yeah, HR's on it. They're just batching contracts." Or CFO wants to roll all retention agreements into one board packet. Plausible? Annoying, but plausible. I had the draft, the emails, the promise. I told myself they were slow, not dishonest. The migration closed 2 months ahead of the revised schedule. The client signed off. There was champagne in the kitchen. The CEO wrote a heartfelt post on LinkedIn about cross-functional excellence and tagged half the company. He didn't tag me. That stung for about 5 minutes. Then I went back to fixing one last edge case. 2 days later, I pinged HR directly. "Hey, just following up on the retention bonus agreement we discussed back in March. The draft looked good to me. Anything needed from my side to finalize?" She replied within 5 minutes. "Thanks for checking in. All good. Just waiting for final sign-off from finance. Should be wrapped up soon." The emoji annoyed me more than the delay. Soon turned into end of quarter, then after board meeting, then after the audit wraps up. Each time, the explanation was just plausible enough to make arguing feel petty. Meanwhile, my actual paychecks stayed exactly the same. No line item for $85K, no one-time payment, nothing. I kept working, not because I'm a saint, but because I had a mortgage, a resume that looked better with lead major client migration on it, and a stupid, stubborn part of me that still believed that if you did what you said you would do, other people might eventually do the same. The anniversary talks started in September. 10 years of Norvale. Big milestone. The CEO loved anniversaries almost as much as he loved his own reflection. There were planning committees, mood boards, surveys about whether people preferred an open bar or family-friendly activities. There were rumors about a special recognition segment for long-timers and key contributors. My manager dropped a hint in one of our one-on-ones. "You'll like the anniversary, just saying." I asked, "Is that about the bonus or about the cheap wine?" He laughed and said, "Both, hopefully." I didn't laugh back. At that point, the unread email threads in my inbox about contract updates were starting to feel heavier than they should have. Still, I didn't escalate, didn't threaten to leave, didn't slam my fist on anyone's desk. I forwarded one of the early emails to myself, to a personal account, and kept going. The night of the anniversary, they rented out a downtown event space with exposed brick and industrial lamps, the kind that looks good in photos and sounds terrible for actual conversation. There was a stage, a projector looping old team pictures, a bar already 2 people deep before the speeches even started. I stood near the back with a beer I wasn't really drinking, watching people who joined 6 months ago cheer for 10 years of history, like they'd been there from day one. HR had sent out a dress code suggestion. Smart casual, which in tech language means sneakers that cost more than your winter coat. The CEO walked around in a tailored suit, hugging people he barely knew, laughing just a little too loud. At some point, I felt a hand on my elbow. It was our HR director. "Hey," she said, trying to sound breezy. "Just so you know, there's a little segment later where CEO might mention you. Nothing big. Just go with it, okay?" I looked at her for a second. Is this about the migration or about that bonus we keep talking about in future tense? She held my gaze just long enough for me to notice the flicker. "It's all positive," she said. "We'll talk numbers next week. Tonight is about the story." That was the moment something in me moved, very quietly. not snapped, just shifted, because suddenly it clicked. For them, the bonus wasn't about paying me, it was about the story, the line in a deck, the slide for investors that said, "We believe in rewarding our top talent," with a nice round number attached. The narrative was already written. I was just supposed to add the emotional voiceover. Half an hour later, I watched the CEO walk up onto the stage, take the mic, and launch into his usual greatest hits about humble beginnings and betting on people, not just ideas. People clapped at the right times. The investors at the front nodded along, drinks in hand. He talked about the product, the growth, the early employees, and then he smiled, turned his head slightly, and said my name, my full name. "Where is he?" "There you are. Come up here for a second." I felt a couple dozen heads turn in my direction. My manager nudged me forward. HR was smiling too hard. The lights were hotter than they looked from the back of the room. As I walked toward the stage, I realized that one way or another, whatever I said next was going to stick to me for a long time. Not just in this company, with these investors, with everyone watching. And for the first time in a very long time, I decided I wasn't going to say anything I couldn't live with later. The lights hit me square in the face when I stepped onto that stage. Warm, bright, blinding. For a second, all I saw was a blur of silhouettes. Co-workers, partners, investors, people sipping drinks and waiting for whatever story the CEO had rehearsed. He placed a hand on my shoulder like we were old friends, like the last 12 months had been a shared triumph. Instead of a quiet negotiation, he delayed again and again. "And this," he said, voice booming through the speakers, "is the guy who saved the ex-migration, the man who made an impossible deadline look easy." People clapped. Some whistled. A couple of junior engineers who barely knew me raised their glasses. I smiled politely, the kind you wear when you're trying to keep your jaw from tightening. Then he went on. "And because we believe in taking care of our best people," he tilted his head toward me, building the moment like he was delivering a punchline he adored. "I want you all to hear directly from him how our $85,000 retention bonus helped make this year a little easier." It was a clean line, clear, confident, executed like he'd practiced it in the mirror. The problem? I had never received a single dollar of that bonus. Not promised, not scheduled, not pending, nothing. And suddenly the room wasn't warm anymore. It was suffocating. I looked at the CEO. He expected a grateful laugh, a heartwarming story, maybe even a humble brag about paying off debt or taking a vacation. A piece of theater that would make investors smile and make Norvale look generous. Instead, I just stood there, and then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. The CEO's smile twitched, half a second. Most people wouldn't have caught it, but I wasn't most people. I'd spent a year reading microshifts in client reactions, exec reactions, investor reactions. I knew exactly what that twitch meant. "Go ahead," he said lightly, nudging the mic a little closer to my mouth. "Tell them." I glanced toward the CFO. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the floor, jaw clenched. HR was frozen with a fixed smile, the kind that said she'd known this moment was a bad idea but hadn't been able to stop it. And I realized something. They expected me to play along. They had banked on it. Because in their minds, who wouldn't? Who would embarrass the CEO in front of the board? Who would risk looking ungrateful? Who would make a scene? I took the mic. Let me be clear. I wasn't planning to humiliate anyone. That wasn't the point. I just wasn't going to lie. Not for them. Not publicly. Not after the year I'd given them. So I said nothing. Just held the mic. Breathed once and let the silence stretch. People shifted in their seats. Someone coughed. The tension spread through the room like a slow crack in glass. The CEO tried again, still grinning. "Come on, man. 85 grand? That's life-changing. Tell them what it meant to you." His voice hit a slightly higher pitch at the end. That was new. That wasn't scripted. I finally looked directly at him and spoke. Calm, steady, no anger, no theatrics. I'm still waiting to see that bonus in my account. That was it. The room reacted like someone had yanked a cord from an amplifier. A sharp drop in energy, heads turning, investors exchanging quick glances, a few managers blinking like they'd misheard. The CEO's hand slipped off my shoulder. He laughed, too lightly, too fast. Ah, well, you know how finance is with timing, he said, eyes darting toward the CFO. Paperwork, audits, all that fun stuff. The CFO swallowed hard and gave a stiff, rehearsed nod. HR stepped forward like she wanted to intervene, but wasn't sure how to spin this in real time. I stepped back from the mic and offered a neutral smile. No accusation, no scene. Just a simple truth. I walked off the stage. As I moved through the crowd, people whispered, not loudly, but enough that I could feel the shift. The celebration vibe had cracked. No one wanted to clap anymore. No one wanted to look the CEO in the eye. After the speeches ended, he found me near one of the high tables by the bar. Hey, he said, voice low and tight. Next time, maybe give me a heads up before pulling something like that. I looked at him. Next time, maybe give me a heads up before announcing payments I haven't received. His jaw flexed. He forced another laugh. We'll sort it out Monday. Tonight was supposed to be a positive story. Then maybe we should start with positive facts, I said. HR approached next, voice syrupy sweet. We'll finalize everything very soon. Don't worry. Let's just enjoy the night. But something in her eyes told me she already knew this wasn't going away, because no matter how they tried to spin it, no matter how many smiles they pasted on, what happened on that stage wasn't awkward. It was a fracture. I didn't know it yet, but that quiet answer just put a clock on my CEO's career, and the countdown had already started. By Monday morning, the congratulatory emails from the anniversary event had mostly stopped, replaced by something quieter. The kind of silence that makes people close their Slack windows when you walk by. I wasn't surprised. Corporate embarrassment travels fast, even when everyone pretends nothing happened. What did surprise me was how quickly the executives scrambled. At 9:12 a.m., HR emailed me a revised retention agreement. At 9:13 a.m., she followed up with, "Please review ASAP. We'd love to wrap this today." The new document was different, a lot different. The amount was lower, $50K instead of $85K. The criteria were rewritten, now tied to future milestones. The date was changed, no mention of the anniversary, and the final signature lines were missing entirely. It wasn't just sloppy. It was strategic. I read it twice, then pulled up the original draft from a year ago. Same file name structure, same legal template, but the new one had been created late Sunday night, less than 24 hours after the anniversary. They weren't finalizing the original deal, they were rewriting history. I walked into HR's office with both versions printed. She stiffened when she saw them. "This one," I said, placing the new doc on her desk, "isn't what we agreed on." She cleared her throat. "Finance wanted some updates based on current budget realities." "That's not what this is," I said. "This is a different contract." Her eyes flicked toward the glass wall of her office. She lowered her voice. "Look, the CFO is under pressure. They just want something cleaner for the board." Cleaner. A great euphemism for less incriminating. I didn't argue. Not there. Not with her. It wouldn't have mattered. Instead, I asked the only question that mattered. When was my original bonus accounted for in the books? Her face changed. Barely, but enough. A tightening at the corners of her mouth, a flicker in her eyes. "I don't handle financial reporting," she said. "But you know," I replied calmly, "everyone in this building knows when they put it in the budget." She didn't answer. I thanked her for her time and walked straight to the CFO's office. He was typing aggressively, shoulders hunched, a posture I'd come to recognize. The posture of someone hoping their keyboard is loud enough to drown out reality. "Got 5 minutes?" I asked. He didn't look up. "Busy morning." "I'll be quick," I said. "When was my bonus recorded as paid?" That's when he stopped typing. Slowly, he leaned back in his chair. His jaw twitched once. The same twitch I had seen on stage. "Why are you asking?" he said. "Because you already used the payout to justify last quarter's compensation efficiency, and I want to know how you explained paying me something I never received." He blinked. Once, twice. "I don't discuss internal audits with employees," he finally said. "But you do send them to investors," I replied, placing a printed copy of the deck on his desk, the one I'd found Friday night, buried in a shared folder, listing my paid retention bonus as evidence of Norvale's talent investment strategy. His face drained of color. "You weren't supposed to access that," he said quietly. "It wasn't locked," I replied. "And my name was in it?" He reached for the papers, but I placed my hand on them first. "I'm keeping these," I said. "We'll talk again." I walked out before he could respond. That's when I realized I'd been turned into a line item in a story I never agreed to tell. That afternoon, I reached out to someone I trusted. Ethan, a former coworker who'd gone into compliance work at another firm. He wasn't dramatic. He wasn't loud. He just understood how numbers and ethics intertwined in a ways executives hoped no one noticed. We met at a cafe 2 blocks from the office. I brought the documents, the drafts, the emails, the investor deck screenshots, the HR responses. He read them slowly, methodically, then set the stack down. "This isn't a misunderstanding," he said. "This is misrepresentation. Maybe worse if they used your non-existent payout to boost metrics tied to executive bonuses." I felt heat rise in my chest. Not anger, clarity. "What do I do?" I asked. "You follow procedure," he said simply. "Do not confront them again. Don't threaten to go public. Don't resign. You go through the internal whistleblower channel. They're legally required to have one. And copy the external auditor. Quietly. Formally. Factually. And then, he said, you let the system do what it was built to do." I spent the next 3 evenings gathering everything. Timestamps, email headers, document histories, Slack logs, screenshots, payment records, or the lack of them, and the exact version of the investor deck that declared my bonus paid. I wrote a clear, neutral report. No emotion, no speculation, just verifiable facts. At the end, I added one sentence. "I'm submitting this in good faith and request confirmation that my concerns will be evaluated by an independent reviewer." When I clicked submit, the screen didn't congratulate me or give me a confetti animation. It just reloaded. Bland, corporate, final. 2 days later, the office felt different. Not louder, quieter. Executives speaking behind closed doors. HR walking faster than usual. Finance avoiding eye contact. By Thursday, we got the announcement. External auditors will be conducting a targeted review of all compensation practices. Please make yourselves available for interviews. Someone in the kitchen muttered, "That's weird timing." It wasn't weird. It wasn't random. It wasn't even surprising. It was the beginning. They thought my silence at that party was awkward. They had no idea how loud it was about to get. The first sign that things were unraveling came quietly, not with shouting, not with accusations, not even with a memo. It was the way our CFO stopped using his glass-walled office and started taking calls from conference rooms with the blinds pulled shut. It was the way HR flinched every time her phone buzzed. It was the way our CEO, usually the loudest man in any room, began speaking in soft, clipped sentences, like each word might be used against him later. The auditors arrived on a Monday, not the internal audit team, the external one. Neutral, formal, the kind of people who don't blink when executives posture. They wore plain clothes, carried laptops with tamper-proof seals, and asked for access to everything. Payroll logs, board packets, compensation amendments, financial forecasts, and emails. Lots of emails. By Wednesday, they called me in. The interview wasn't hostile or dramatic. They didn't ask loaded questions. They simply wanted facts. verification, and the timeline. I gave them everything: the drafts, the Slack messages, the investor deck, the payout log showing no deposit ever made. When I finished, the lead auditor closed his laptop gently. "Thank you," he said. "This was very clear." Clear. Not helpful, not interesting, not, "We'll look into it." Clear. That word stayed with me. By the end of the week, something else changed. People in the office started avoiding the CEO, not out of fear, out of awareness. Like they'd finally seen the invisible crack behind the stage lights and realized the foundation wasn't as solid as he'd always made it look. Meetings disappeared from calendars. The CFO canceled his usual finance sync. HR stopped sending cheerful reminders about team lunches. It was a strange kind of calm, the kind right before paperwork becomes consequences. A week later, the board flew in. Not all of them, but enough to signal this wasn't a routine review. The CEO tried to spin it as a strategic alignment, but no one believed it, especially not when two board members, including the one who had championed our last funding round, asked employees to schedule private one-on-ones to better understand internal culture. I had mine on Thursday. It wasn't long. 15 minutes, maybe 20. I presented the facts again. No emotion, no embellishment, just the truth. They thanked me for my professionalism, and when I walked out, I saw something I had never seen before. The CEO, sitting alone, staring at the floor, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Not angry, not performative, just defeated. He looked up when he noticed me, and for a second something flickered in his expression. Not apology, not regret, recognition. He finally understood that the story he had been trying to tell, the story where he was the visionary leader who took care of his people, had collapsed the moment he needed me to lie for him, and I didn't. The announcement came the following Monday. An all-hands meeting on short notice, mandatory attendance. The CEO stepped onto the stage looking 10 years older. He delivered a shaky speech about new opportunities and choosing to transition out of day-to-day operations. There was no applause, not even the polite kind. The CFO didn't speak at all. HR announced she would be taking extended leave. The board chair took the mic next. Her tone was calm, controlled, unmistakably final. Effective immediately, Norvale will be reviewing all past compensation reporting practices and issuing corrective actions where appropriate. You didn't need to be in finance to understand what corrective actions meant. After the meeting, I was pulled into a small conference room. Two board members, the interim COO and legal, were waiting. They didn't make speeches. They didn't flatter me. They didn't pretend this was anything other than what it was, cleanup. They slid a packet across the table. Inside, full payout of my original $85,000 retention bonus. Additional compensation for delay and misrepresentation. Confirmation that my personnel file would reflect no wrongdoing and that I had acted appropriately. A quiet offer to stay. A promotion. A raise. A new era of transparency. I read it carefully. The money mattered. I won't pretend otherwise. $85,000 changes your life in very real, very practical ways. But when they asked, "Do you want to stay and help rebuild?" the answer came easily. "No," I said. "I think it's time for me to move on." Not dramatic, not emotional, just true. I already had an offer from another company, one that valued accountability, one that saw my actions not as disloyalty, but as integrity. The choice wasn't hard. My last day at Norvale was quiet. No farewell party. No cheap sheet cake. Just a few coworkers stopping by to shake my hand and say things like, "You did the right thing. I wish I had your patience." I'm glad someone finally said something. When I cleared my desk, everything felt strangely light. Not triumphant, not vengeful, just done. A few weeks later, on a random Tuesday night, I was scrolling through my phone when I saw a clip from a business conference. A familiar voice caught my attention. The CEO, my former CEO, was on stage giving a talk titled Leadership in Times of Change. He was smiling, polished, rehearsed, talking about ethics and taking care of teams and earning trust through transparency. I watched for maybe 10 seconds. Then I turned off the sound, set my phone down, and went back to making dinner. Because the truth was simple. He could tell whatever story he wanted now. I was finally out of it. And the silence that ended his career, it had given me my freedom.